Homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One, Shakyamuni Buddha. Today, we study Dhammapada verse 9 with the title, A Meaningful Life. The verse reads as follows: A life lived meaningfully is one of spiritual practice. To live as if already dead belongs to those with evil hearts. Clearly understanding this, the wise strive diligently, perfumed by virtue, concentration, and wisdom. They attain supreme nirvana. The story revolves around King Udina, the ruler of Kosambi. This tale is peculiar in ties to many significant events in the Buddha's ministry. King Udina ascended to the throne under extraordinary circumstances. When his mother was pregnant with him, she was wearing a red silk robe, sitting in the yard with her husband, a hawk, mistaking the shimmering red silk for a piece of meat, swooped down and carried it away to a mountain. Later, she gave birth to the king on that mountain, where he was raised by a hermit. As he grew older, a hermit helped him tame a divine elephant, leading to his reclaiming the kingdom. This story has a mythical tone and doesn't directly relate to the Dhammapada verse, but it does connect to its message. When King Udina became ruler, he had many queens. Each queen and consort had their own unique preferences. Among them, the main characters were two consorts, Samavati and Magandiya. The two were complete opposites. Queen Samavati had deep faith in the triple gem, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. She guided her attendants to also revere the triple gem. At that time, the Buddha and his disciples visited the land of Kosambi. In contrast, Queen Magandiya harbored intense hatred toward the Buddha. She also influenced her attendants to despise the Buddha, inciting widespread slander and blasphemy against him throughout Kosambi. Queen Samavati, a devoted follower of the Buddha, regularly made offerings to him and the Sangha. Meanwhile, King Udina remained indifferent, allowing both queens to act as they pleased. The king showed no particular reverence for the triple gem. The family of Queen Samavati was originally wealthy and belonged to the upper class of society. However, a great cholera epidemic broke out, causing numerous deaths. Terrified, her family dug a hole in the wall to escape, taking their children into the forest to seek refuge. At that time, there was no cure for the disease, and those who failed to flee in time perished. The family lived in the forest for a long time. When Queen Samavati eventually returned, her parents had already passed away. Later, she was adopted by Gosaka, the treasurer. Gosaka was a remarkable figure. His foster father had attempted to kill him 7 times but failed each time. In the end, Gosaka inherited all his foster father's wealth. As Queen Samavati grew up, her striking beauty became evident. Thanks to her charm and virtue, she was brought to the royal court by King Udina and became one of his queens. On the other hand, Queen Magandiya, in her youth, was an exceptionally beautiful young woman from a Brahmin family. Her parents were immensely proud of her beauty and always rejected suitors, believing no one was worthy of her. Magandiya's family was well versed in the Vedas, a vast repository of Indian knowledge. They could read omens, understand astronomy, and practice various mantras. Because of this, they were convinced that their daughter should marry a king or some supreme figure. One day, Magandiya's father encountered the Buddha as he was teaching in the Kuru region. Seeing the Buddha's dignified demeanor and perfect appearance, the father was struck with awe. The Buddha's radiant skin, composed bearing, and glowing aura exuded an indescribable beauty. Magandiya's father thought to himself, "This is the one truly worthy of my daughter." Overwhelmed with excitement, he hurried home to prepare everything, determined to offer his daughter to the Buddha. He thought, "Today, I have found the perfect match." In this world, such a form is truly unparalleled. Muttering to himself as he walked, he arrived home and told his wife and daughter Magandiya about his discovery. He then eagerly took Magandiya to meet the Buddha. The Buddha, aware of the coming opportunity to teach and guide, used his supernatural powers to leave a footprint on a rock near the riverbank and silently went to sit under a tree to wait. When Magandiya, her father, and mother arrived, they saw the footprint on the stone. Magandiya's father was thrilled. But her mother, upon observing the footprint, remarked, "Stop dreaming. The one who left this footprint has transcended worldly pleasures and is free from all attachments. This is no ordinary being." Despite this, Magandiya's father insisted on taking his daughter to meet the Buddha. When he saw the Buddha, he joyfully approached and introduced himself. "This is my daughter, the most beautiful in the world. Many have sought her hand, but none were worthy. Today, I wish to offer her to you." He went on for a long time, praising Magandiya's beauty. The Buddha silently listened, then said, "In this world, everything is impermanent, nothing lasts forever. What is called beauty is just an outer form, a bag of skin filled with impurities. It is not something that an enlightened being needs, not even to touch with the tip of a toe." Upon hearing the Buddha's words, Magandiya's parents immediately attained the stream entry stage, Sotapanna, and, bowing their heads in reverence, asked to take refuge in the three jewels. However, Magandiya, filled with pride and hatred, felt deeply insulted. She swore to take revenge on the Buddha. After her parents renounced the world to follow the Buddha, Magandiya returned and took over her family's wealth. Later, her uncle brought her to the capital to meet King Udina. Upon seeing Magandiya, the king was immediately captivated by her beauty and made her his queen. Even though she became a queen, Magandiya's hatred for the Buddha never subsided, especially when she discovered that Queen Samavati, whom she viewed as a rival, was a devoted follower of the Buddha. Her hatred grew even stronger. Magandiya constantly spread rumors and falsely accused Samavati to King Udina, claiming that Samavati was plotting rebellion. Not stopping there, Magandiya organized groups to slander and insult the Buddha everywhere. When the Buddha and the monks went out for alms, they were surrounded and harshly scolded. Unable to persuade King Udina, Magandiya devised a cruel plan. One day, when the king went on a hunting trip, Magandiya ordered that all the doors of the palace where Queen Samavati and nearly 100 of her attendants were staying be sealed. She then had oil poured and set the entire palace on fire. Queen Samavati and the attendants were burned alive in that tragedy. When King Udina returned from his hunt, he sat before the pile of ashes, sorrowful but hiding his grief. At that moment, Magandiya stood nearby with a look of smug satisfaction. A servant asked the king, "Your Majesty, who is responsible for this?" King Udina replied, "Samavati, while alive, often troubled me greatly. Only someone who truly loves me could have done such a thing." Upon hearing this, Magandiya couldn't restrain herself and blurted out, "It was I, your servant. Who did this? I just wanted to help you get rid of such a great nuisance." Hearing this, King Udina smiled bitterly and said, "If that is truly the case, I will reward you greatly. Call all your relatives here, and I will bestow a reward upon them." Magandiya immediately sent word to her family, summoning all her relatives to the palace. When they arrived, King Udina ordered them all to be arrested. He commanded that Magandiya and her relatives be tied up and buried up to their waists in the ground, then ordered an ox plow to pass over them. The remaining relatives, including distant ones, were also executed. Finally, Magandia was burned alive in front of everyone. This story shocked the entire kingdom of Kosumbi. And everyone was filled with fear. They saw clearly the power of karmic retribution and the cruelty of hatred. After the incident, the monks asked the Buddha about the deeper causes of the events. The Buddha explained the past lives of the individuals involved, revealing that these events were the results of karmic consequences from many previous lifetimes. Buddha concluded with the following Dhammapada verse: "A meaningful life is one dedicated to cultivation and spiritual practice. A life devoid of virtue is as if already dead." He elaborated, Queen Samavati, though deceased, lived a meaningful life because she devoted herself to spiritual practice and performed many virtuous deeds. Conversely, Magandia, though alive, had long been dead in a meaningful sense, as her heart was consumed by malice, hatred, and jealousy. To live without cultivating virtue or engaging in spiritual practice is akin to being dead. A person who lives selfishly, harboring anger and envy, causing suffering to themselves and bringing turmoil to others, leads a life devoid of meaning. However, even if such a person realizes the Dharma for just a moment, begins to practice, and transforms their mindset, their life can become profoundly meaningful. Those with life experience often assess a person's true character by how they treat others collectively, not just based on their behavior toward a specific individual. Similarly, the measure of a meaningful life is the positive impact one has on those around them. If their presence brings peace, fosters virtue, and spreads moral teachings, that person leads a truly good and meaningful life. When such individuals pass away, their absence is deeply mourned by many. Moreover, a meaningful life extends beyond merely being good to others. It must also involve spiritual progress. This requires diligent practice, meditation, and striving to achieve a state of selflessness. If one focuses solely on worldly values such as knowledge, fame, or wealth, even while performing good deeds and accumulating merit, it is still challenging to avoid creating negative karma. Such a life leads to an endless cycle of birth and death, resulting in exhaustion for oneself. A person who is kind to others but neglects spiritual cultivation will continue to oscillate between good and evil, merit and sin. They will cycle through realms of existence repeatedly, and their life will feel increasingly weary over time. Thus, a meaningful life not only entails being good to others but also involves directing the mind toward purity, selflessness, and liberation. In past lives, the Buddha had once been a universal monarch due to his immense virtue. Yet, he taught that samsara still pulled him through its endless cycles, causing weariness and suffering. He emphasized that true happiness is achieved only through the cessation of samsara and rebirth. In one particular past life, he and his parents were trapped in a tunnel without food. To save his parents, he sacrificed his own life, offering his body as sustenance. This noble act allowed his parents to survive their plight. As a result, when he was reborn as Prince Siddhartha, King Suddhodana and Queen Maya cherished him with boundless love, remembering his extraordinary sacrifice in their past life. This illustrates that the Buddha's compassion and selflessness toward all beings are boundless. His merits are immeasurable. Yet he also emphasized that all things, even the greatest merits, must eventually come to an end. Despite having been a universal monarch, he still experienced rebirth. Thus, he taught that ultimate happiness lies in liberation from samsara. Living in samsara, if we are not yet free, we must live righteously, with integrity, and serve others so that each lifetime brings us closer to higher realms of existence. If we solely chase after fame and material wealth, even if we enjoy blessings in this life, we may fall into hardship in the next. These material values are fleeting and impermanent. The most valuable aspect of a person is not their possessions or status but their heart. A person whose soul is filled with moral virtues, who lives with love and sacrifices for others, is truly worthy of respect. The lesson from Magandiya. Magandiya's greatest mistake was harboring hatred against a noble saint. Her soul was shattered from that moment, leading her from one misstep to another. The story tells that when the Buddha spoke truthfully to Magandiya's parents, they immediately attained the first stage of enlightenment, stream entry, and took refuge in the Triple Gem. Magandiya, however, failed to recognize the truth in his words. Instead, she misunderstood that the Buddha was insulting her, considering her to be despicable. This misunderstanding bred a deep resentment within her, driving her to commit great misdeeds. Magandiya's resentment led her to harbor deep hatred for the Buddha, seeing him as the root of her humiliation. Driven by her anger, she began committing a series of malicious acts. She incited rumors and organized groups of people to slander and defame the Buddha and his disciples publicly. She fueled hatred against Queen Samavati, whom she viewed as a rival, by falsely accusing her of plotting treason against King Udina. Finally, Magandiya orchestrated the cruel act of burning down the palace chamber where Queen Samavati and nearly 100 court ladies resided, resulting in their tragic deaths. These actions demonstrated the depth of her anger, jealousy, and lack of remorse. However, karma does not spare anyone. Magandiya's malicious deeds ultimately led to her own demise. When King Udina discovered Magandiya's role in the palace fire, he devised a plan to punish her. Feigning gratitude, he invited her to bring her relatives to the palace, under the pretense of rewarding them. Once they arrived, the king ordered their arrest and carried out a severe punishment, burying them waist-deep in the ground and allowing oxen to trample over them. Magandiya herself was publicly executed by fire. From the story of Queen Samavati and Magandiya, we learn a profound lesson about hatred. When one harbors hatred, especially toward a virtuous individual, they not only accumulate negative karma but also shatter their own soul, leading to a cascade of errors and missteps. If, in a previous life, Queen Samavati had not committed unwholesome deeds against the Paksika Buddha, perhaps her fate in this life would not have been so tragic. The Buddha once taught that no matter how much merit one accumulates, as long as one has not escaped sasra, they remain bound by the consequences of karma. Every existence, whether exalted or humble, carries its own forms of suffering. Thus, the Buddha emphasized that true happiness lies in the cessation of sasra. For those who have not yet attained liberation, it is vital to live righteously, cultivate kindness, and engage in spiritual practice to gradually ascend to higher realms. In our current lives, if we fail to control our minds and allow hatred to dominate, we will inevitably create more negative karma, perpetuating our cycle of birth and death. The tragedy of Queen Samavati's death did not originate in her current life but stemmed from a past life. In a previous existence, she was also a queen. Those with great merit often repeat their blessings over many lifetimes. At that time, she and her attendants went down to the river to bathe. In that land, there were monks who had attained enlightenment. At the time, there were 34 Paksika Buddhas, silent Buddhas. One of them was meditating in a bush nearby. After bathing, Queen Samavati and her attendants lit a fire to warm themselves. Accidentally, they burned the bush, causing the meditating Paksika Buddha to be engulfed in flames. Upon seeing this, the queen and her attendants were horrified. They feared that the king would punish them for unintentionally killing an enlightened being. Thinking that this was an unforgivable crime, they decided to cover up the incident. They added more firewood, burning everything completely so no one would find out. It was precisely this grave karma from a past life that clung to Queen Samavati and her attendants, leading to their tragic fate in the present life. Even though the queen lived virtuously and faithfully revered the triple gem, the law of karma spares no one. Unpaid debts from the past persist. And even if she accumulated great merit in this life, the consequences of past actions still manifested when the conditions ripened. From the story of Queen Samavati and Magandiya, we learn a profound lesson about hatred. When one harbors hatred, especially toward a virtuous person, they not only accumulate karma but also shatter their own soul, leading themselves into a cycle of repeated mistakes. If, in a past life, Queen Samavati had not committed the unwholesome act against the Paksika Buddha, perhaps she would not have faced such a tragic end in this life. However, the truth is that the Paksika Buddha in this story did not die. Why is that? Because an arahant, having entered the state of Nirodha Samapatti, cessation of perception and feeling, cannot be harmed by anything. Weapons cannot cut them, and fire cannot burn them. The queen and her attendants had built a large pyre and set it ablaze, thinking they could erase their mistake. The first time she burned the Paksika Buddha, it was unintentional and therefore not a sin. But the second time, knowing full well her actions were meant to cover up her mistake, her deliberate intent became a grave offense. Later, Queen Samavati and her attendants suffered the karmic result of being burned alive in the palace. However, this was not due to the Paksika Buddha seeking revenge in a future life. The Buddha taught that karma does not always manifest between the same individuals, it can operate through different relationships and conditions. For example, if one is killed by someone, it does not necessarily mean they had killed that person in a past life. Similarly, if someone is robbed, it does not mean they had stolen from the same person before. The workings of karma are far more complex and are not always directly between two individuals. In Queen Samavati's case, the initial mistake was minor, unintentionally harming a Paksika Buddha. However, out of fear of being discovered, she committed a greater offense to conceal the original one. Many people in life face similar situations. At first, they make a minor mistake, but out of fear of exposure, they try to hide it, leading to greater wrongdoings. Humans often cover up small mistakes by committing larger ones. This pattern leads to unforeseen consequences. If you make a small mistake, have the courage to admit it. Repent, and take responsibility. By doing so, you can redeem yourself and make amends. Conversely, if you continue to deceive and conceal, your life will be steeped in guilt and suffering. In the case of Queen Samavati, despite her past karma, her immense merit in this life, living righteously, showing faith in the triple gem, and frequently offering alms to the Buddha and the Sangha, ensured that after her death, she and many of her attendants were reborn in heavenly realms. This illustrates that even with past karma, if one practices diligently, repents, and accumulates virtue in the present life, one can transform negative karma and attain realms of peace and happiness. When people asked the Buddha about the fate of Queen Samavati and her attendants after they perished in the fire, the Buddha revealed that many of them had been reborn in various heavenly realms. He detailed the names and destinies of each individual and affirmed that those who practice righteousness and do good deeds lead lives of great meaning, even after death. He concluded with the verse, "A life of meaning is one spent in spiritual cultivation. A life filled with hatred is as good as death. Though their deaths may appear similar outwardly, their significance differs entirely." If we look at only one lifetime, many people struggle to understand why a virtuous person like Queen Samavati met such a tragic end. In reality, there are many similar cases in life. We see good people who commit no wrongs, suffering or dying under painful circumstances, causing their families to curse the heavens. Some families lose a virtuous child, one who excels academically and achieves great success, only to die suddenly in an accident. The family mourns deeply, questioning why evildoers thrive while someone so kind and promising is taken away. Karma behind death. The Buddha explained that some people do not truly die in the ultimate sense. They descend to the human realm to repay certain karmic debts with their families and then return to their rightful place in the heavenly realms. Their deaths are peaceful transitions, not endings. For example, some individuals appear in the dreams of their relatives after death, assuring them that they have ascended to celestial realms and are content and happy. This indicates that death is not as simple as we perceive, there are always profound reasons behind it. A correct perspective on death. Tragic or sudden deaths often have deeply rooted karmic causes that we cannot fully comprehend. Therefore, we should refrain from making hasty judgments or blaming fate. Instead, we should understand that everything happens for a reason within the framework of karma. Recognizing this, we should live virtuously, accept life's challenges, and prepare for the inevitability of death. If we ever face a tragic death, we should courageously embrace it with serenity, free from resentment or blame. Imagine a scenario where someone points a gun at you, and you know they have decided to kill you. In that moment, there is no chance for escape or help. The only path left is to accept death. In such a situation, instead of panicking or pleading, remain calm. Understand that everything is governed by karma. And if death comes, embrace it peacefully, without fear or regret. Death often carries deeper meanings that we cannot always see. What matters most is how we live righteously, doing good deeds, and cultivating ourselves spiritually to ensure a peaceful transition. The Buddha taught that life and death are meaningful when guided by spiritual practice and understanding of karma. When confronted with death, maintain composure. Remember today's teaching, if possible. Close your eyes. Accept your karma, and embrace your fate. Facing death with serenity is far nobler than succumbing to fear or begging for mercy in unavoidable situations. While death is an inescapable karmic result, accepting it calmly and serenely is truly admirable. If there is a chance to alter fate, in ordinary circumstances, we can chant, pray, and generate merits, hoping to avert calamity. If favorable conditions remain, the Buddhas may assist us in overcoming danger and continuing our lives, allowing us to create more merits and compensate for our karmic debts. However, if faced with definitive karma that cannot be avoided, accept it peacefully. This attitude of equanimity and acceptance is still the best way to confront it, free from resentment and fear. This translation covers the entire text. Let me know if you'd like further refinements or clarifications. This shocking series of events left a profound impact on the people of Kosambi, reminding them of the inescapable power of karma and the destructive nature of hatred. The Buddha's teachings on karma. After these events, the monks asked the Buddha about the deeper karmic connections between the individuals involved. The Buddha explained the long-standing karmic ties from their past lives, revealing that all the events were the result of actions and intentions sown in previous existences. Through this story, the Buddha taught that hatred only perpetuates suffering, and the only way to end it is through forgiveness, understanding, and the cultivation of virtue. Those who hold on to anger and seek revenge inevitably harm themselves, just as Magandia's hatred consumed her life and led to her downfall. In contrast, Queen Samavati exemplified a life of kindness, patience, and faith in the Dharma. Even in the face of adversity, her devotion and virtues ensured that her life, though tragically cut short, remained profoundly meaningful and inspiring to others. The story serves as a timeless reminder of the power of karma, the consequences of hatred, and the path to liberation through virtue and wisdom. It encourages us to live lives rooted in love, compassion, and mindfulness, knowing that these are the seeds of true peace and happiness. 1. The Brahmin elders. These elders were displeased because the Buddha, who was still very young, he attained enlightenment at the age of 35, managed to attract most of their followers. These elders were often over 60 or 70 years old, holding positions as priests in religious rituals, possessing magical powers, charms, and fortune-telling skills that made them highly respected. However, after the Buddha appeared, many of their followers left to follow the ascetic Gautama. This hurt their pride, leading them to slander and oppose the Buddha. 2. The ascetic sects, particularly those practicing extreme austerities, like fire worshippers, who followed rigorous and harsh methods to gain supernatural powers and attract disciples. These practitioners took pride in their severe practices and inner strength, such as standing on one leg under the blazing sun or in the rain for extended periods, feats ordinary people could not achieve. When the Buddha introduced the middle path, which avoided such extremes, he overshadowed these sections, arousing their envy and fierce opposition. In ancient India, ascetics were held in high esteem because of their endurance and ability to withstand rigorous challenges, which demonstrated their inner strength. This quality, known as tapas in Sanskrit, was considered a form of spiritual power, competing for followers. These sects often openly attacked the Buddha and his teachings. 3. Devdatta. Devdatta, the Buddha's cousin, was another significant source of opposition. He was talented, charismatic, and handsome, but he harbored deep jealousy and competitiveness toward the Buddha. Initially, Devdatta humbly sought ordination under the Buddha, but his humility was not genuine. Later, after gaining the trust of King Ajatasattu, Devdatta felt empowered and launched a series of direct challenges against the Buddha. King Ajatasattu, who had ascended the throne by killing his own father, admired Devdatta because he had displayed supernatural feats in the royal court. Leveraging the king's trust and the power of the Magadha kingdom, Devdatta orchestrated numerous rebellions against the Buddha. 4. Queen Magandiya. In the Kosambi region, Magandiya, a jealous and vengeful queen, mobilized people to insult and verbally attack the Buddha. She orchestrated a campaign of extreme hostility, using vulgar and obscene language to defame him. When the Buddha went on his alms rounds, Magandiya's followers lined the streets, shouting insults and obscenities far more vulgar than common quarrels, tenfold or even 100-fold worse. Even Venerable Ananda, who had not yet attained full liberation, found it unbearable. He advised the Buddha to leave Kosambi to avoid further defamation. But the Buddha refused. He explained that one must face karmic conditions wherever they arise to fulfill the mission of transforming sentient beings. Carrying his alms bowl, the Buddha walked silently amid the torrent of abuse. For those lacking strong resolve, this hostility could be disheartening. Venerable Ananda, overwhelmed by sorrow and desperation, sought the Buddha's guidance. The Buddha responded with a verse that later became part of the Dhammapada. Just as an elephant endures arrows in battle, so too does the Tathagata endure abuse. The world is fraught with delusion. Evil abounds everywhere. The Buddha likened himself to a war elephant. A skilled general riding a battle elephant faces many dangers in defense of the country. The elephant endures arrows from head to toe, with attackers relentlessly trying to harm it to capture the general. After the battle, the elephant bears wounds all over its body, with blood flowing from every injury. Yet it remains steadfast, unyielding in its efforts. The Buddha said that he is like the battle elephant, enduring many insults and attacks. He sees this as a normal and inevitable part of bringing the light of Dharma to the world. If a normal person were to hear others curse and criticize them, they might feel hurt. But the Buddha faced such slanders calmly, as if they were a natural part of life. If we lived during the time of the Buddha, as outsiders who did not follow him, we would clearly see that those who opposed the Buddha were wrong. The Buddha had a radiant, dignified presence, never spoke in vain, never acted wrongly, and only brought benefit and morality to many people. Therefore, anyone who opposed the Buddha was in the wrong. But if we were followers of the Buddha, committed to his teachings, we might easily be shaken. We might offer alms to the Buddha and support him. But when we hear others speak ill of him for hours, we might start to doubt. We might think, he is good. But is he entirely good? Could there be some flaw? This is the state of mind of many people, except for those who have attained realization and are steadfast in their practice. Once one has reached the stage of stream entry, sotapanna, their faith in the Buddha will be unshakable. These individuals will not be influenced by slander, they will even try to persuade and guide those with evil intentions, advising them not to create more negative karma. However, for those who have not yet attained realization, if they are continuously influenced by others, they can easily become confused, doubt, and lose their faith. At a different time, those who oppose the Buddha, such as the Brahmins, the heterodox sections, Devdatta, and Magandiya, all believed they were right. They did not recognize their mistakes and thought that opposing the Buddha was justified. We must remember that those who opposed the Buddha at that time believed they were doing the right thing. They did not realize they were wrong. And this is something we must be cautious of today. Always be vigilant with ourselves. When we decide to oppose someone, hate someone, we often believe we are right. But unbeknownst to us, it could be due to past karma rising in our minds, pushing us towards hatred and leading us to mistakenly believe we are right when we are actually completely wrong. We must conquer the hatred in our hearts. When we feel hatred rise within us, we should focus on eradicating that very hatred. This is the most certain path of practice. If we sit and wonder whether to hate or not to hate, we have already failed from the start. True victory is when we turn inward, recognize, and remove the hatred in our hearts. Often, hatred arises from past karma. In some previous lifetime, we may have had a grudge or unresolved conflict with someone. Now, that karmic residue resurfaces, compelling us to hate or oppose that person. If we cannot overcome that karma, we will fall into hatred, create new karma, and our lives will spiral downward. We must practice by eliminating hatred. This is the only way to keep our minds pure and our lives elevated. Principles of Dharma: those who recognize their mistakes will gradually correct them. Mistakes may not disappear immediately, but recognizing them is the first step toward correction. Those who do not recognize their mistakes will continue to err. Those who fail to realize their mistakes will continue in their wrong ways, and their sins will accumulate. To practice is to know one's mistakes. Those who know their faults are practicing true Dharma. The wise are those who recognize their faults. Since we began to learn the Buddha's teachings, if we look back and see how many mistakes we have made, it shows that we have wisdom and are on the right path of practice. On the other hand, if after many years of practicing the Dharma, someone asks us, "Do you recognize any mistakes?" and we do not recognize any, it indicates that we have not truly practiced, and we lack wisdom. Those who do evil are those who never admit they are wrong. They persist in believing they are right, and this belief traps them deeper into wrongdoing. In contrast, those who recognize their faults will never be evil, for they are always striving to correct themselves and improve. Such people are wise and are on the path of holiness. When you hear someone speak ill of others, do not rush to believe it. If you believe immediately, you are not yet mature or wise. A mature person is someone who knows how to consider things carefully and does not easily take one side. Believe in good people, and you will gain blessings. Believe in bad people, and you will accumulate sin. But if you do not believe anyone, you will gain both blessings and sins. What is right? What is wrong? There is no eternal answer. Right and wrong are always the challenges humans face through countless lifetimes. When we recognize something is right, it is only the temporary right. No one is right forever. And no one is wrong forever. Human beings are forever tested between right and wrong. This statement should be remembered and always kept in mind. When we hear anything, we must assess it with a vigilant mind. Let us listen to the next story from the Dhammapada. Effortfully maintain mindfulness. Be careful in all actions. Live according to Dharma, and your good reputation will spread far. There is a story about a wealthy family during the time of the Buddha. They had a large treasure of gold and money carefully hidden. When a plague broke out, the family had to flee into the forest, leaving everything behind after 12 years. Gambhira Osaka, the son of that family, returned alive. The house was now in ruins. The plague had passed. But he did not dare to dig up the treasure immediately. He knew that if he did, it would attract thieves who would come to rob him and kill him. He had to work as a laborer for the king's treasurer, living on alms while waiting for a safer opportunity to retrieve the treasure one day. King Bimbisara passed by the house of the treasurer and heard Gambhira Osaka's voice. The king recognized his voice as that of someone who had once been wealthy and of high status. The king asked the treasurer about him, and was told that he was just a poor orphan with no relatives. The king did not believe it, saying, "This voice cannot belong to a poor person." The king ordered an investigation. An old maidservant was sent to learn more and brought her daughter to live with Gambhira Osaka to observe him. After getting married, Gambhira Osaka's life became difficult. He was not paid fully and had to support his wife. In his hardship, he secretly returned to the old house of his family and took some gold to cover his expenses. His wife later presented a piece of gold to the king. Upon examining it, King Bimbisara immediately recognized it as rare and valuable gold, which could not belong to an ordinary person. The king had Gambhira Osaka followed and discovered that he had been secretly returning to the old house to take gold. He was arrested and forced to confess. He explained that his family had been wealthy but had fled due to the plague, leaving behind the treasure without daring to retrieve it, as there was no one to protect it. Upon hearing this, King Bimbisara verified the truth and realized that Gambhira Osaka was a wise, cautious, and trustworthy person. The king reinstated him as the treasurer, had the house rebuilt, entrusted him with great responsibilities, and rewarded him generously. Gambhira Osaka, despite once being wealthy, accepted to work humbly and lived honestly, without boasting. His patience and carefulness helped him regain his position and achieve success. The lesson from Gambhira Osaka's carefulness: when he returned to the old house and saw that there was no one to protect it, he dared not dig up the treasure. This teaches us a great lesson: something precious must be protected. For example, when we prepare a valuable medicine for our parents to drink, we must protect it carefully to avoid accidents like a cat jumping and spilling it. All the effort of the doctor and the one who prepared the medicine will be wasted if we are careless. Nuclear power plants must be strictly protected, as an attack could destroy a whole city and cause unimaginable consequences. The environment, including forests, rivers, and air, is precious and must be protected to maintain life. Peace in our country and the world is priceless. We must protect peace and not be swayed by provocations that lead to unrest. disrupting the tranquility that many generations have shed blood to build. The Dharma is the most precious thing. The light that guides everyone to live according to morality and compassion. We must protect the Dharma. Not let it be destroyed by those with evil intentions. We should live with wisdom, ethics, and fulfill our duties. Whatever is valuable and beneficial to ourselves and others must be protected. And we should not be indifferent or neglectful. May everyone live wisely according to the Buddha's teachings, so that life may be peaceful and truly meaningful. I look forward to meeting you in the next Dhammapada teaching. Homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One, Shakyamuni Buddha.